Excellent.
Welcome
Thank you.
everyone to this week's Madafa at the Palestine Museum US. I'm Krista Brun, volunteer at the Palestine Museum US, tuning in from Madison, Wisconsin. Welcome to this week's Madafa. We have with us today Professor Nurit Peled-Elhanan, joining us today from Athens, Greece. Nurit is a specialist in language education, social semiotics, and multimodality, who has dedicated herself to studying the Israeli discourse in education in an effort to promote a more equitable and inclusive education system for all. Having retired from her position as a lecturer at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, she continues to make a significant impact on education and social justice through her work at the David Yellin Academic College. Nurit has edited and authored several books and numerous articles. Her groundbreaking book, Palestine in Israeli School Books, Ideology and Propaganda in Education, which was published in 2012, offers a comprehensive analysis of the portrayal of Palestine within the Israeli school curricula. This work not only highlights the presence of ideological bias, but also exposes the propagation of propaganda within the educational system. Last year, in 2023, in her most recent book, Holocaust Education and the Semiotics of Othering, she explores the subject of Holocaust education and the semiotics of othering in Israeli school books in an effort to encourage a re-evaluation of the messages conveyed, thereby aiming to foster a more empathetic and balanced understanding of history. Nurit has also received prestigious awards such as the Sakharov Prize for Human Rights and the Freedom of Thought by the European Parliament. This award serves as a testament to her tireless efforts in challenging oppressive systems and advocating for the rights of marginalized communities. Nurit's commitment to seeking truth and justice extends beyond her academic endeavors. She played a crucial role in co-initiating the Russell Tribunal on Palestine with Ambassador Leila Shahid from 2009 to 2014 to examine human rights and international law violations related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in order to promote accountability and create a platform for activism and solidarity. In short, Nurit's contributions to education, her dedication to challenging harmful discourse, and her tireless pursuit of human rights serves as an inspiration for future generations of scholars and activists seeking to promote justice, equality, and understanding in an increasingly complex world. Nurit will be providing us with a PowerPoint presentation, and then please stay for our open discussion. You have the opportunity to ask questions, which I encourage you to put in the Q&A. Feel free to put your comments in the chat. And without further ado, we'll get started. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Krista. And one moment, I will reconfigure the screen for 1 second, please, here.
Can we do something to prevent the chats from popping up all the time?
Yes, we will take care of that.
Yeah, that's important.
One second, please. Okay, and we are disabling the chat during the presentation, so we'll turn it back on when we begin the discussion. Nurit, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to this webinar. I'll start right away with my PowerPoint, and I'll speak through it. All right?
Krista?
Is this all right for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So the name of the PowerPoint, the title is Representation of Palestinians in Israeli School Books, It is based on my two books, Palestine and Israeli school books, and the recent one, Holocaust Education and the Semiotics of Othering. I just want us to remember for one moment how important education is and to what catastrophes it can lead when it goes the wrong way. And there are many more, of course, as you know. Both Jewish and Palestinians, you cannot tell who is who. Now, people who don't know much about Israel, Israel is what is called a secular colonial ethnocracy, which means that one ethnic group, Jews of European origin, dominates all other ethnic groups. And there are many ethnic groups in Israel, but I will divide them into two groups. One is the imported Jewish and non-Arab Olim, immigrants, who are candidates for integration and assimilation and are being molded and cultivated to suit the ideal of a Jewish Western modern democratic state. These people, the first years of their life in Israel, and sometimes many more years, are subjected to symbolic cultural elimination and to what is called inner colonialism. We will not talk about them. The other group we will talk about is the indigenous Arab Palestinians, who are not candidates for integration and assimilation, for they are treated as a race that cannot be changed, and they're not Jewish, of course. They are subjected to symbolic, cultural, and physical elimination. The function of school books is to legitimate this inequality. As Tzvi Beckerman says, education does not provide any innovative solution to inequality, but rather provides an appropriate rationalization for inequality. And in fact, this is why we have school books, because why do we need school books? There are history books and geography books and all the books. We need the school books because this is the tool of the state to legitimate whatever they want to legitimate. I will give you, I will give you one example from a civic studies book. There is no contradiction between the fact that Israel is comprised of a civil nation of citizens and the fact that several ethno-cultural minorities live in it, but that the only nation that enjoys self-determination is the Jewish one. This is a very typical way of legitimation, just presented as a fact that does not bear to be refuted. It doesn't invite you to any kind of discussion or question. This is the way it is, and there is no contradiction. Another example of this legitimation of discrimination is the following passage from the same book, Civic Studies. There is a system of military courts which tries the Arab inhabitants of Judea and Samaria who are under the military dominion of Israel. Why, how, what does it mean? It doesn't say, it just presented as a fact, almost a natural fact. What it means, of course, is this. Okay, the children are tried in military courts, and this child, after being lynched, is handcuffed to his bed in the hospital. All right? No other child would have suffered that, but he was tried in a military court, and that's why he's handcuffed by the age of 12. But of course, this is not in the books. The students who study the books never see these things, so they don't really understand what the implications are of the two systems of justice, the military one for the Palestinians and the civil one for the Jews. School books should create what is called a usable past and legitimate the founding crimes of the state. This is, I mean, you come from many countries, go look at your books, they all do that. In fact, they have to turn reality into what Van Leeuwen calls a version of this reality. A usable past is an account of events that can be harnessed for some purpose in the present. And of course, in Israel, it's the legitimation of conquest and occupation of Palestine and Israel, the whole land. This may lead to sacrificing accuracy and objectivity, and we can see it very well when we look at timelines. If you compare Palestinian school books and Israeli school books, and you look at the timelines, you think you talk about two different histories. Each one creates their usable past. Let's see what it means by an example. This is a passage from school books of 4th grade called Story of Homeland. It made a bit of scandal this year when parents realized this is what their children learn, but usually parents don't care about these things. So I will read it to you. A 12-year-old speech to her guests on the occasion of a birthday. Dear guests, I thank you for coming to our beautiful settlement, Ofra. Ofra is one of the first illegal settlements built on Palestinian villages in Yabrud and Silwad in 1977. We know it is a holy commandment to settle the land and to continue the way of the pioneers in the country of the Bible in our settlement of Ofra. There are people who think we have no right to live here in Ofra because the Arabs lived here while the people of Israel was in exile. The settlement in this region is justified by, in our opinion, by the Bible and the tradition, and is important from a security point of view. Our houses were built on state lands, and we are trying to keep good relationships with our Arab neighbors. So of course you can analyze it and say that none of it is true factually, but that doesn't matter. This is the story that the school book composes for the students, and it serves the agenda of the government. One of the reasons that every time a government changes, there are battles, horrible battles over school books because of these things. So this is it. Israeli school books are meant to legitimate the Zionist project of conquest and settlement to both Jewish and Palestinian Arab students, because the Palestinian Arab students in Israel who study in a different system, in their own system of education, they learn the same books translated to Arabic. Now, all these books have some basic assumptions in order to be authorized. In Israel, the school books are private industry, trade books, but they have to be authorized by the ministry. So we have hundreds in every subject, and teachers can choose. In order to be authorized, they must have these basic assumptions, some of which are existential. What exists? Jewish historical rights on the land of Israel, Palestine, and global anti-Semitism. You don't discuss it, you don't refute it, you don't question it. Value assumption, what is good and desirable, Jewish state, Jewish majority, and Israeli control as a guarantee against another Holocaust. I highlighted it because this is the most important principle in Israeli discourse, social discourse, political discourse, educational discourse. We must outnumber them in order to save ourselves from another Holocaust, and I'll come back to it. Just remember it. Therefore, it's no wonder that Israel never wanted to teach peace, never had a peace education program or official mixing between Jewish and Palestinian students, although they can be 200 meters from each other. Okay, about my study is what is called social semiotic inquiry, because the real issue we want to reveal is really not the technology, but the future shape of what we call the social. That's what Günter Kress said. It is the social that determines the semiotic choices, and it's the social that is affected by them, because semiotic choices like words or, I don't know, drawings, or maps, or all those things affect the society and public opinion about a lot of things. And the semiotic analysis of textbooks tries to answer social questions and reveal rhetorical interests through a multimodal analysis, namely through an analysis that takes into account everything that's on the page or on the screen, doesn't matter. the verbal, the visual, the colors, the animations, everything. And this whole says something. Give you an example. You see this photograph? It's, what is it? Flooded street in a poor neighborhood anywhere in the world. I'm sure that now with the storm in the United States, you'll have a lot of these. No people. We don't know, or no identifiable people. And you ask yourself, I ask myself, what is the meaning of this photograph? And how was it made? What are the criteria features of the photograph that made it apt to be represented at this point in the book? Now let's see what the point is. The caption says, the Palestinian problem has ripened in the poverty, inactivity, and frustration that were the lot of the refugees in their miserable camps. Again, the lot is some kind of fate. The main text says, although Israel came victorious out of the survival war that was forced upon her, the Palestinian problem would poison for more than a generation the relationships of Israel with the Arab world and with the international community. And that explains a lot. It's not only a self-engendered and a self-directed phenomena free of all human cause and human action, but it's poisonous. And we all know that if we have stagnant water for a long time, they become poisonous. So this is what I wanted to show you, is the social question and the semiotic question merge into each other. So school books present social facts as natural facts, just like this and what we saw before. My social question was, how do the oppressors educate their children? Which is a paraphrase of Frantz Fanon's question, how did the oppressors behave? So I took one aspect of this behavior, and I wanted to ask, for example, what kind of education takes nice boys and girls and turn them into these people? Okay, these people. People who believe they are doing the right thing by killing an 11-year-old girl who had a kitchen knife in her hand. They believe her life has no value and she is, as Judith Butler says, ungrievable. She's superfluous. You can get rid of her, and then they take pictures with the woman. So how do you do that? And then the semiotic question was, how do school books depict these others of Israel? Those who are marginalized, oppressed, or ungrievable, as I said. First of all, this representation, we know this from colonialist representations, has to be racist, because the colonized must be assigned an inferior evil race. Otherwise, you cannot justify whatever it is you're doing to them. Your oppression, your domination, your exploitation, etc. What does it mean to rationalize a whole group of people? It means presenting their negative qualities as if they are in their blood. Okay? I'll give you this example. The Arab society is traditional and objects to changes by its nature. Reluctant to adopt novelties, modernization seems dangerous to them. They are unwilling to give anything for the general good. So this is a racist representation because it takes a whole population and establish it as a group that never changes and has these qualities in their blood. And of course, visually by stereotypization. And I'll quote Zygmunt Bauman, whatever marks remains of the face serves as badges of membership, the signs of belonging to a category of which the owner of the face is but a specimen. So we have a category of people, and each member is just a sample of this category. We can take an example from the Jews in in anti-Semitic Europe, they were treated as a race, a group that has certain qualities that are bad and that made them superfluous or worthy to be exterminated, really. And each and every member of this category was of no interest to anybody. Let us see an example. This is from a geography book, Jewish versus Arab population in Israel. As you see, the upper parts is Jews and others. And it shows two figures that have no ethnic signs on them. You don't know if they're Jews or not. And then we ask ourselves who the others are. The book doesn't say, but we can assume that the others are people who are not Jewish, but they are not Arabs. So they can be included in the Jewish group. At the lower part, we see the Arabs represented by two racist icons. The funny Alibaba with his camel that we saw before. I know it's the first time we see it. And every time this book mentions the citizens, the Arab citizens of Israel, they show this caricature. Okay? In all the hundreds of books that we have in Israel, you cannot find one photograph of an Arab person that looks like us. So it's either this caricature or the primitive farmer following his horses, his donkeys, or this Alibaba guy who doesn't resemble anyone, who was taken from a 19th century drawing of a European artist. And for example, in this case, the caption says the Arabs refuse to live in high buildings and insist on living in land-ridden houses. Okay, so what we believe is good quality of life, to have a villa and not to live in a high building with too many apartments. For them, it's a sign of primitiveness and unwilling to give anything for the general good. And this is another stereotype. So in this way, we make these people others. We distance them in order to legitimate their exclusion and elimination. What Bauman says is the person must become an abstraction. The overall effect of abstraction is that moral and ethical rules do not interfere where the handling of a category is concerned. If we say all of them are this, it doesn't evoke any feelings or empathy or anything. When we deal with questions, what are we going to do about this? Therefore, usually Palestinians are not mentioned in school books at all, as they are not mentioned anywhere in Israel, in the social discourse, in the artistic discourse, in the political discourse. Nobody mentions them. When people say Israeli writers, a writer like Emil Habibi, who was a citizen of Israel and a member of Israeli parliament, is never mentioned. He's not an Israeli writer. So if they are mentioned, it's only as a problem and threat. The refugee problem, developmental problem, demographic problem, security threat, and these problems must be solved. One way of abstracting people is just not showing them where they live. Here we have an aerial photograph of the camp of Jabalia, which now everybody knows is the most crowded place in the world. And the caption says, Jabalia refugee camp in the Gaza region, whose inhabitants live in overcrowdedness and poverty. Again, it is presented as something natural, something that was made by itself. Nobody caused it, but we don't see the people. And Van Loon says that this is the angle of the omnipotent observer placed high above the madding crowd, the angle of the pilot who flies too high to be able to see the people on whom he's dropping the bomb. And this is what education calls objective knowledge. Okay, and we know these days exactly what the pilots can do when they don't see the people on whom they are dropping bombs. Of course, real photographs from Gaza are never shown in Israeli press or Israeli school books. We just saw a few. Okay. This is another example, a checkpoint, empty of the people against whom it was constructed. You see, they are not there. Some kind of abstract threat. They never see this, which is a regular checkpoint, a real one. So when you abstract everything, you can ask rational questions based on the criterion of utility. What is the purpose of the checkpoint, in your opinion? How does it represent our defensive democracy? Administrative intention, explain. Is it good? Is it bad? And so on. Again, the children have no idea what administrative detention is, except for what the book says, but they never see anything. So let's see some examples. And this is how she came out about 2 weeks after. Another way to eliminate them really is symbolic elimination from the books. Okay, we saw that you just don't show them, but you can eliminate them by showing everybody else. This is a cover of a book called Living Together in Israel, and we see how happy all the people are to live together in Israel. But if you look at them, they're all white, no Arabs, and no Ethiopian Jews. But this is for another lecture. Okay. And of course, the best way to symbolically eliminate people is through maps, what is called cartography of exclusion or geographic silence. This is a map of Arab population in Israel. There is not even one Arab city mentioned here, nothing, not even Nazareth. And the impression is that the Arab live among us, upon us, on us, and this is very frightening. The West Bank, as you see, is colorless. And here they say that this colorless area means an area for which we have no data. We don't know, maybe there are no people there at all. So this is a wonderful way to really eliminate, because nobody knows their country. All we know is the map. And the use of mental maps. For example, factors that inhibit the development of the Arab villages. Arab villages are far from the center, the roads to them are difficult, and they have remained out of the process of change and development. They are hardly exposed to modern life, and there are difficulties to connect them to the electricity and water networks. Now, you should think we're talking about Australia, but we are talking about an area that I think is smaller than New Jersey, or I know it's smaller than Los Angeles County. So where are they, these remote villages? But nobody asks, because mental maps are very, very powerful. So again, majoritarianism, we must be a majority, the anxiety of incompleteness. Yes, we will not be complete until we Jewify the whole land, and the fear of minorities legitimate their confinement in strict boundaries. So this is what the book says. We must preserve the national land and protect it from illegal invasion by non-Jewish population of citizens, for fear that an Arab sequence would cause the detachment of the Galilee from the state of Israel. And of course, whatever happens to them is their fault. It's not our fault, so it's not interesting. Their painful defeat, Zionist ideals, and Israel's definition as the state of the Jewish people make it hard for Israel's Arabs to accept their minority status. Just note that the Palestinians are never called Palestinians in Israel. They are called Israel's Arabs. And they are to blame. As I said, when you go to war, you cannot lament your defeat. The Arabs brought it upon themselves, for they fought the Jews to perdition. What else does it legitimate? Military government and occupation. The military government helped Jewish settlement all over the country and prevented Arab seizure of vacant lands. Of course, the vacant lands are the lands that were confiscated from them. I mean, it prevented their return. but it is a good thing. And it also legitimates distancing through racist laws, such as the law of citizenship, which denies citizenship for Palestinians who live in the Judea and Samaria or Gaza and who marry Israeli citizens. So they cannot live together. There are tens and thousands of families that cannot live together. Some defend the law in the name of Israel's defensive democracy and the danger of terror attacks. And some for the national reason and the Jewish character of the state. Although the Supreme Court ruled the law is unconstitutional, this book says human rights are not a recipe for national suicide. Okay, so these families, these torn families, have very hard time to function, for example, to enroll children in school and things like that. It also legitimates ethnic cleansing. From a Jewish point of view, Plan D was a great success. It strengthened the military power of the Jewish community and created a Jewish territorial sequence as a strategic asset. Now, they don't say why it is good, because this is so ingrained that this is good. So you don't need to give more information and say, and this is good. And of course, it legitimates killing. The escape of the Arabs, followed by the Deir Yassin massacre, solved a terrifying demographic problem, and even a moderate person such as the first President Weizmann spoke about it as a miracle. So, and of course, we have the logic of survival, yes, and each enemy killed, we feel safer. Okay? Massacre of Kibya brought some confidence to Jews in their homes and restored the morale and dignity to the army, and so on and so forth. Why do these people have to die all the time? The explanations are usually technical and dissatisfactory, because Palestinians always die either because they don't do as they're told or by mistake. And we see it now in Gaza. We told them to leave. We gave them, I don't know, 13 minutes to leave, and they didn't leave, so what can we do? Same thing you have in the books. The loudspeaker encouraging the inhabitants of Deir Yassin to leave the village did not work. The people did not leave the village, and that is why they were killed. And for the massacre of Kibya, the soldiers did not know the people were hiding in their homes that night. So it's very technical and really not very sophisticated excuses. But they don't bother about the excuses. What they bother about is to show you that these actions were, in the long run, good for the Jews. So the overall claim is a positive outcome for us when condone or overlook evil done to them. This is the idea. And so a rhetoric of victimhood and power is developed. The Jews are the eternal victims. Therefore, we must outnumber the indigenous others, dominate them, and be the most powerful state in the region, lest another Holocaust should exterminate us. For that, we have also to Nazify the Arabs, and I'm sure you hear all the time our politicians, how they speak about the Hamas and the people who committed the terrible massacre in the South. They call them Nazis all the time, okay? And this is purposeful. In a student guide to grade 2, is written, the students will understand that during World War II, the Jews did not have a state. That is why they were perished. The establishment of the state of Israel guarantees our security and safety. We are in conflict with a neighboring country and the Arab world, but now we can defend ourselves. And this is very similar to the speeches we hear from the Prime Minister. You who wanted to exterminate us 80 years ago, we will not let you do it. But he's not talking to the Germans. He's talking to the Palestinians or Iran. So this is what the children know from the age of 7. And this is interesting. In a book, history book that prepares students for the final exam, the matriculation or A-level, there is a chapter, and it is in all the other books too, the formation of Holocaust remembrance. But this chapter does not talk about the Holocaust, and it does not talk about the Germans, and it does not talk about the Jews. It talks only about the terrorist attacks of Palestinians since they began in a very decontextual way. And so they are presented as anti-Semitic heinous crimes when they're completely decontextualized, okay? And after every such report about a terrorist attack, every such report ends with this event made room for bereavement and pain and facilitate the identification with Holocaust survivors. This traumatic event exposed the weakness and vulnerability of Israelis in the face of terror and led them to adopt a different attitude towards Holocaust survivors. Until then, they couldn't understand them, but this made them sympathize, okay? Like other terrorist attacks, this event also exposed the weakness and the vulnerability of the Israelis against their enemies and enabled many Israelis to identify with Holocaust survivors and to be attentive to their stories. Okay? The conflation of Palestinians and Nazi Germans. In conclusion, Israeli school books command the students to ignore the other drama, that of the victim and their circumstances. Disregard international laws and decisions and look ahead of injustice to the favorable consequences for the Israeli Jewish nation. They teach the students the discourse of power of politicians and of generals and put at stake what is called the disciplinary politics of truth, but all school books do that, of course. What education creates is what is called elite racism, which is a racism reproduced and inculcated from above and then implemented in all other social fields, in practices of humiliation, exploitation, violence, in discourses, and so on. And the purpose of this racism is, as Balibar says, to prevent our own or our identity from all forms of mixing, interbreeding, or invasion. And this is the main message of all the school books. It doesn't matter how they differ from each other. To strive to a pure national Jewish state and to get rid of all the others one way or another. Thank you very much. So I'll stop sharing now.
Wow.
Thank you, Nurit, for that powerful presentation.
We need a minute to breathe.
It's really quite disturbing information, even if you know about it, just to hear it again and again.
I mean, we knew about things like this, but we didn't realize the extent to which this thing goes. This is incredible, and I doubt a lot of people in America know this.
Nobody in America knows. Even the European Parliament, all they hear about is the slander in Palestinian textbooks, and they don't.
Yeah.
They refuse really to monitor Israeli textbooks.
So, Nurit,
you must feel like quite a stranger in the state of Israel, given what you uncover. I'm saying, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just wonder how you, as an Israeli, feel with this knowledge, and it'd be really fascinating for all of us to appreciate your journey, to dedicate your life's work to uncovering this knowledge and sharing it with others to inspire a more equitable educational system. I wonder if you want to start there. I know you were born in the first year of Israel's existence, and your grandfather is one of the signatories of the Declaration of Independence for Israel. And I know that you lost your daughter to a suicide attack. You've had such an incredible journey, and how just share with us a little bit about how you got to where you are to commit your life in this way. And
who my brother Miko publicized as signatory of the Declaration of Independence. He belonged to a group that was quite clandestine, that was called Pact of Peace. It was founded by Martin Buber, the German Jewish philosopher, and they advocated a binational state.
Mhm.
So he belonged there. My father too, he was always critical about, even when he was in the army, he was critical about these practices. In 1956, when he was the governor of Gaza, he had an idea, he put the idea to the government to give the Gaza Strip autonomy and not to return it to Egypt, and use this place as a bridge of peace. Of course, they didn't listen. And in 67, 68, when he left the army, he really dedicated the rest of his life to peace between Palestinians and Israelis. He was the first notable to fly to Tunis, disguised as a woman, and meet Yasser Arafat and start negotiations or talks. He founded, with two other friends, Uri Avneri and Yaakov Arnon, the Council for Israel-Palestine. Then he founded a political party that he called the Progressive Party for Peace. So really, he dedicated his whole life to that. So this is, I mean, this is the heritage, if you want.
Yes, that's a rich heritage.
Krista,
yes.
let me just let people know that the chat is now available for entering comments, but please put your questions in the Q&A to help Krista and I sort the questions out for Nurit. Nurit, this aspect of Israel that you described, would that be kind of a characteristic of Zionism as a concept, or is it a characteristics of a state that went rogue?
I don't know. Zionism, I think, like any ideology, produces many views about how to handle things. I'll just tell you as an anecdote that my father was accused. He was called a traitor and so on. Our lives were threatened, and etc. And then he sued one of the journalists who called him anti-Zionist in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided that he was a good Zionist. And he had a certificate. He used to carry it in his pocket. He said, I'm the only one in the world who has a certificate. So Zionism was founded in order to find some solution to the Jews in Eastern Europe. Then the Holocaust came, and it became really, an ideology of rescue of victims and so on and so forth, with all the complications and, when the state was founded, everybody said, okay, Zionism has done its job. It's finished. Let's not talk about it anymore. When I was growing up, when we wanted to say blah, 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 we used to say Zionism. It's talking Zionism, Then at 1973, the UN declared Zionism as a racist movement, and everybody became Zionist again in Israel. Of course, today, the interpretation of present government and the settlers and so on of Zionism is horrifying. And so what I'm saying is that you can, take the ideology as Marxism, as communism, and take it to many directions, all right? I don't think personally that we need Zionism anymore. There are no more Jewish victims in the world. Nobody persecutes the Jews. We can turn it into something good, something, to become cosmopolitan, to become empathic to others' suffering and so on. But this does not happen. It's not happening in Israel. In Israel, the atmosphere, the race, the discourse is very racist from the beginning.
One of our viewers asked actually why this this whole system is so effective and successful. to what extent do people see past it? Are there people in Israel who challenge these notions, you know, in their work, in their positions? You know, I just wonder if you could speak to that a little bit. It's so pervasive in Israeli society and so successful. It's so ingrained. Clearly, you've explained how the state operates, but why is it so powerful and effective?
Because children are educated in fear. As I said, in fear of another Holocaust. The central factor, the focus of Israeli identity is the Holocaust. It's not Zionism. Okay, and children are traumatized and re-traumatized every year from the age of 3. And this is purposeful, of course. There's interest in that. And then at the age of 16, 17, they go to Auschwitz and other death camps, wrapped in Israeli flag, and come back full of vengeance. Okay, and then you can point to the neighbor and say, he's our potential exterminator. So we should, if you read testimonies of soldiers from Breaking the Silence, I'm sure you know what it is. Many of them say that. They say, I was educated that everything I do to Palestinians will save us from another Holocaust. Until I pointed my gun at the head of a little girl and I realized what I was doing. So this is very powerful. When you traumatize people, when you really, really traumatize them. As an example, what's her name? Susan, photographer.
I'm not sure you
No, Susan?
Give us another hint.
Anyway, she's very, she wrote the book, Watching the Suffering of Others.
Okay.
So she tells that at the age of 12 in Long Island in California, or in New York, I don't know where she grew up, she went along the beach and she saw someone selling old postcards and she looked into them and she discovered a postcard from death camps, horrible postcard. And she said, my life has been divided since that moment to before and after. Because once you are exposed to these things, you are maimed. And you can imagine children exposed to these horrifying, gruesome photographs and perverse stories. What one of the main Holocaust historians in Israel calls the pornography of evil. She says, all you teach them is the pornography of evil and that we are victims. It affects you in a way that you live in fear all the time. You live in fear. You can see now in Israel, after a year of demonstrations against the government, people are coming together in solidarity with the soldiers, etc., etc. Okay, so I think this is why they succeed so much. And because of this fear, teachers and journalists are auto-censoring themselves. They don't go as far as they can, even if they think they have something else to say. Okay? Yeah. And it's very, I think it's very typical of a very small and closed society. And in Israel, it's not a real society because we have groups of people from all over the world who have nothing to do with each other. Ethiopian Jews, and Russian Jews, and Polish Jews, and American, nothing, except for the fear of the enemy.
Nurit, you've cited plenty of examples in your presentations on, you know, how these educational concepts translate in real life. Could you tell us how you, when you look at what's going on in Gaza there, what is the connection between some of those things that are happening there by the Israelis? How they, where they relate to in their education and what they've learned, and how does that manifest itself in Gaza?
Well, as I said at the beginning, when I showed you the pictures of the dead children, you couldn't say if they were Jewish or Palestinians. And to come to such a to such a point where you can really kill some children, it needs a lot of education, a very thorough one and profound one, to convince the students that these people are ungrievable and their life have no value and they are superfluous, really. They're superfluous or dangerous, okay? And when the Ministry of Justice in Israel said a few years ago that you should kill the terrorists with the mothers and the babies and so on, because they will grow up, these snakes, she said, they will grow up to become terrorists. This is the politicians speak like that. So, of course, it's education. They were not educated to any kind of sympathy to others, any kind. And it's funny because there is a project in Israel, the other is me. And in old school, you have the slogans, the respect differences, love the other, and so on and so forth. And in one of the books, you have a chapter about meeting the other. And a boy, Israeli boy, meets a French boy, okay? Because Palestinians just don't exist in this equation. Only the fear, the terrible fear. And I think this education is very successful now. We don't only have this education, we have the education of the settlers. What I show you is the mainstream, but you have the education of the settlers, which is completely racist. And I believe that the murderers of Hamas and those who came with them, on top of the fact that they came from horrible, deprived life, were brainwashed too by someone to believe that if they kill and rape and murder the babies and kidnap and so on, something good will come of it to them and to their nation. So I think everything is education. Education is so important because it really molds you. Children spend half their lives in school. And
right, from very early
come
on.
from a very, very radical house. You know, there are refuseniks in Israel who don't go to the army and so on, but they are a minority and they come from very special houses where the education is stronger than at school. Okay, but usually it's not. Yeah.
So for you, you had that, what I would call informal education from your family. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how important that is for Palestinians who are Israeli citizens who undergo this same Israeli indoctrination education, how they really depend on some other informal education to survive an educational system that really doesn't even name them or recognize them for who they are or their history.
Very hard. They don't learn anything about themselves or their own history or their own culture. Nothing. Nothing. And then they have to, you know, somehow mingle and find a place. But you have to ask an expert on that. My colleague Samira Alayan is the expert on Palestinian education, both in and out of Israel, and she wrote a book about it and many articles about it. It's a field that is researched by Palestinian scholars.
Of course.
But I can say
and what about
my Arab students, my Palestinian students, that they have a very hard time because there's no higher education in Arabic in Israel, and they come, you know, they hardly know the language and so on. My son, for example, Guy, is a theater teacher, and he teaches in a college in the Galilee, and he insists on teaching in Hebrew and Arabic together in the same class, okay? And this is an amazing process, what goes on there. And he really, you know, empowers them and so on. But he's one of a kind. I don't think many others do that. And they come to these Hebrew universities and Hebrew colleges and Hebrew acting schools, and they have a very hard time, very, very hard time.
And there have been efforts, of course, to establish, you know, institutions of higher education for Palestinians in Israel, but they've all been shot down. And so many Palestinians end up, you know, going to the West Bank or going outside in order to have, you know, a more open opportunity to exist in the classroom as a Palestinian.
Going to the West Bank to universities. Yeah, they do that. But it is so hard for them to get up in the morning and to arrive anywhere.
Yeah.
Because of the checkpoints that many prefer to come to the Hebrew University. And those who succeed, but they have a terrible time because of the language and because of a lot of things.
Sure.
And yes, but you should really invite Samira. She will tell you all about
That
it.
would be wonderful, a wonderful follow-up to your presentation.
You should. She wrote about it, and she about education in East Jerusalem, education in territories, education inside Israel. They have as 4 groups, 4 types of education, controlled by Israel less, controlled by Israel more. But
Sure.
in some, they have a very hard time because not only they are censored and monitored and surveilled all the time and not allowed to speak and so on. They don't have the academic freedom and the freedom of speech that we've had until now. Now we also start suffering from it, yes, but the Arab lecturers and the Arab students and the Arab teachers have suffered from it ever since the state was founded. They are under control all the time.
So someone's asking how Palestinians are portrayed in Israeli textbooks. Of course, I think it's important for you maybe to help our audience understand that education is different for Palestinians in Israel compared to Palestinians who are under the Palestinian Authority. And even there are restrictions on education.
What is the question?
Just to clarify the differences between, well, the question was from our audience, how are Israelis portrayed in Palestinian texts?
Again, you go to Samira.
But of course, that depends on where they are, because the education is different in Israel than under the Palestinian Authority, and even there, as you know, it undergoes restrictions and censorship.
Everything is censored. Everything.
Yes.
From what I know from my colleague Samira Alayan, because she's the one who studies it. They studied the curriculum issued by the Ministry of Education of the Palestinian Authority. Okay, these textbooks are monitored and censored by Israel directly and indirectly through the European Parliament, through World Bank, through all kinds of. So they cannot, for example, write anything about their own history. I think they can teach Islam up until the 17th century or something like that. Okay, very strict censorship. But in East Jerusalem, they are even more monitored because the Ministry of Education, the Jewish Ministry of Education, sponsored them. So first of all, they erased the symbol of the Palestinian Authority from the books. And second, they erase whole chapters. So the children receive books with blank pages. Samira Alayan wrote a very, very good article called The White Pages. You can find it on the internet. How these school books are half blank. You have the title, the heading, and then you have nothing for 2 pages. So everything is very, very monitored and censored. But of course, you know, there's other material that comes to their hands, but not through the ministry.
And so what implications does that have for teachers, the hiring of teachers, the training of teachers, particularly those who end up serving in Palestinian communities in Israel?
Jews don't teach in Palestinian school, and Palestinians don't teach in Jewish school. That's why Israelis don't know any Arabic. They do what they're told. Listen, but I could see on my students when I teach that once they see, you know, when they realize, when they learn how to read those documents, they cannot unknow what they know. I don't know if they use it in class, but I can see they've learned to look differently at the books. That's all I can say.
And someone in our audience is wondering, you know, you talked a lot about this, the racism that is going on blatantly and the indoctrination. How does Israeli society align that practice with Jewish values, which in some sense would go counter to that practice? Or how is that treated? Or does the fear of the fear that's taught everyone to fear and to stand by the state of Israel, does that trump everything?
Well, Orthodox Jews don't think the Zionists are Jews at all.
Mm.
In their neighborhoods, you have posters, Zionism is not Judaism and Judaism is not Zionism. I think that what dictates well, it's complicated because Zionism took the Bible as the basis. Okay? Religious Jews never studied the Bible, they studied the Talmud, and there you have quotes from the Bible, but not the Bible per se. Zionism took the Bible and extracted from it all kinds of heroes, mythological heroes that we should follow. So they mixed secular ideology with elements of the Bible. Okay? There are ongoing discussions all the time, whether this is Jewish or not, whether it goes against Jewish values or not. Jewish scholars say these people in the settlement and all the government are not real Jews, that they betray Judaism and so on and so forth, they say. There's a whole, it's interesting, but yes, someone, people blame each other that you don't like your Jewish people, you're not a good Jew and so on and so on, but most people in Israel don't even know what it is. Most people in Israel are not very knowledgeable in Judaism. As Ilan Pape says, they don't believe in God, but they believe God gave us the country. That's all. So all these philosophical discussions are carried on by scholars and experts.
Nurit, I have another question here. This ideology that we see in the educational system, is that carried throughout, for instance, through journalism, the media, the culture, the books, and other cultural things in Israel? And how does that work there?
More or less, yes. More or less. Today, more than ever, everybody's recruited to this narrative.
So how is the media, the journalism media, and how do they treat
Journalism and
these
media
subjects?
have complete freedom, but they don't use it.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, they're so patriotic that they auto-censor themselves.
Yeah.
I think today there's also the fear of being fired because things change in Israel, as you know, with this government.
Mm-hmm.
So I can tell you that I was called to an interrogation in the police because they said that my my words prove that I support the Hamas or something like that. Okay.
Right.
But a television reporter, one of the main, who said, "I want to see 100,000 Palestinians killed every day." And we wrote a letter to the Supreme Court and so on and so forth, many signatories, and the answer was, "This is in the limits of freedom of speech." Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
I know. So it's very preferential who's being targeted.
I think everywhere it's very
what people are saying.
McCarthyistic in Israel now. Yes.
Isn't that considered incitement, though?
No.
No, because they arrest people for incitement. They do that in the West Bank.
Yeah, but not for that kind of incitement. You see what
Incitement to terrorism, which is narrowly defined as a Palestinian.
But killing 100,000 people a day is not considered terrorism.
Yeah, it was used in the document of South Africa now to the
Yeah, to the court, international
Court of
court.
Justice,
Yeah.
because it proves intent.
Mm-hmm.
This is what gave them this and other expressions like that from politicians,
Sure.
like the
Right.
Minister of Defense, who said no food, no electricity, no.
Mhm.
So this gave them the intent they needed to file the complaint.
So where are we headed in Israeli society? We have, even before October 7th, there were, but especially after, I mean, you know, that you've been singled out for things that you've said. Of course, Palestinian students in Israel are being suspended from universities. People are being fired from their jobs. You know, protests are banned if they're at all sympathetic to Palestinians or against the war on Gaza, so to speak. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about where are we headed with this, and you know, what has your experience been even before October 7th and now with how your work is landing? Is it just landing on deaf ears, or are you able to cultivate a community that brings hope for some other kind of future that is far removed from the current?
Well, this is not my only work. I'm a specialist on literacy and things like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But my books are completely ignored in Israel, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And when people talk about them, they say, well, she's not Zionist. That's all they can say. It's really completely ignored. But what I see ahead, I see terrible things. But, you know, I'm not a prophet, but as things look now, it's a very sad situation. And I don't see any country in this whole enlightened Western world doing anything to stop it. United States.
And you've talked about
before the 7th
Zionist.
of October, they gave $11 million a day to Israel. Now it's doubled. So what do you want? Who can stop it? The only ones who can
Well,
stop.
and you also talk about, I mean, you've talked about the Zionist education in Israel, but of course we have that, and some of our viewers are talking about, you know, comparing that to the Zionist education, which happens also in the United States, where so many Jews grow up outside of Israel, but have a similar indoctrination, and the impact that has on their views of Israel as a necessity to protect Jews and provide safety for the Jewish people.
Yeah, but it's not only that. The president of Harvard was accused of I don't know what, not because of Zionism, because of you know, all kinds of interests. And this is very ugly.
So, in spite of where we are, how do you envision the future, or what?
I don't
envision
any future anywhere. I'm not prophet. You know, they said prophecy was given to madmen, stupid people. I'm not prophet. I see a horrible catastrophe. A horrible.
But
catastrophe.
there are efforts.
We are all impotent. There's nothing we can do. Nothing we can do. We can cry out, we can speak, we can write, but that's all. Nothing we can do.
What do you think of efforts on the ground, like Standing Together or A Land for All? I think it's called. I mean, where Israelis and Palestinians are coming together.
Yeah, it's private initiatives that are very, very nice, but they have no political power to support them. Nothing. Because even those who call themselves center or Zionist left, they're all the same. They are less blatant, they are less disgusting, but you know, the ideology is the same. A Jewish state, a Jewish democracy, and this and that. I think that the anomaly of Israel is that Israel really is a colony of all the Jews in the world, and not the state of its citizens, because every Jew in the world can come and become citizen on the spot and buy land and build houses, something that Palestinian citizens cannot do. So it is a colony, really, without a motherland, but it's a colony, all the Jews in the world. This is not normal. It's a state that is not a state of its citizens. So if anyone would want to really change things, this is the first thing that they should change.
I mean,
There is the law of return to the Jews and no right of return to the Palestinians. And this law of return
Right.
says that anyone from France, from America, from England, from anywhere, if they're Jewish, they can come, they can build houses, they can do whatever they want in this country while they are citizens of another country. Okay?
it's an international vacation club, basically.
Yes, but it behaves like a colony. Right? They behave like the British in India.
Mm.
And this is crazy. This must stop.
And it's funded and supported by the big money in the U.S. and in Europe.
Of course. It's
Germany.
deductible, all of these things. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But this is crazy, really. And there
So-
are other crazy things. I mean, the discrimination of citizens, the fact that people get married and they cannot live together, it's horrendous. And
So-
it doesn't affect anyone outside to say, wait a minute, we must stop that. No, everybody supports it. All of Europe, America, what else do you want? Canada, they all support it.
So,
Well,
Nurit,
Before October
uh,
7th, there was at least some fear about losing Israeli democracy with the weekly protests against the judicial reforms at the Supreme Court level. That is all, of course, dissolved instantly
Yeah, but
through this current
also
crisis.
this-
I wonder what
this-
implications all this has for Israeli democracy or any democracy
First
in
of all,
that space between the river and the sea.
Israel has never been a democracy. Israel is an ethnocracy. There are full rights to a very small group. And what they asked for in this protest is to keep it that way. They didn't really want a real democracy. They wanted to go back to the situation they had before, a beautiful old Israel, where we celebrate our supremacy, we celebrate our wonderful life, which they call Western, I don't know why. And we don't think about the occupation, we don't think about discrimination, we don't think about anything, just live well as we did. And they all waved the flag of Israel and so on. I didn't support it, of course.
so Nurit,
During, towards the end, what was called the bloc against occupation was growing up. It was really growing. Yes, this was very encouraging, but it was small. Now there is kind of a solidarity. We are all together. Everybody goes with a pendant with the names of the kidnapped, and all the grandmothers knit socks with soldiers. This kind of
Oh my goodness.
illusion that we are again in a survival war, okay? And we have to support each other. The wonderful thing that happened after the 7th of October, if you can say wonderful, is that everyone in Israel, everyone, Jews and Arabs and Orthodox and secular and everybody was helping. Suddenly there was this good solidarity between everybody. If they were Bedouin or Circassians or whatever, people who never talked to each other before, suddenly everybody was together to help the people who lost their homes, to help the people who lost their families, and so on and so forth, companies and restaurants. And it was very, very good moment, I think, for the society. And
War is great for unity in Israel, right?
yes, but this was
Unfortunately.
momentary. Yes, and now
so Nurit, based on the picture that you painted here, the Palestinians have no hope of reasoning with Israel or coming to terms with the people there, because it just won't work. So the only avenue left for the Palestinians is armed struggle. Whether it's effective or not right now, it's another question. But based on what you said, all other things are not going to work, and armed struggle is the only avenue left for them.
I don't know. Gandhi
Or international pressure.
Gandhi won
somehow.
the independence of India not through an armed struggle. I don't think anything armed will ever achieve anything. Never.
Well, what else can they do?
I don't know, but armed struggle will bring more and more death. so it will not be a victory.
Well,
to anyone.
So what
There's
hope is
there's
there of
already death.
getting-
I mean, how much more death
Yes,
can
I'm not
they?
a commentator of politics. I don't know these things, but I can tell you what I think for myself. Anyone who is armed is despised to me. Anyone who uses violence to solve any problem
Mhm.
is despicable. Okay, is a murderer for me. So maybe, you know, all these good brains, wonderful brains that keep inventing bombs and ammunitions will sit down and think in another direction. Okay, maybe just, you know, tearing down the walls and opening all the gates and pouring money in the right places will bring something better. Maybe instead of 11 millions a day to a corrupt and violent government, Americans will think to put it elsewhere and give these people good life. And when you have good life, you don't need any armed struggle or any such thing. You don't decide these things on the moment. Violence is the quickest and the easiest solution. And it's not a solution. It never has been a solution, never. So, and education, yes, education, long and slow education to multiculturalism and acceptance and whatever have you. If this is mandatory, maybe they can use their money to force this on Israel. Maybe, I don't know. People should start thinking in other directions, not just say, you're violent, so I'll out-violent you. No, this is not the way.
So I mean, the
Well,
only
there
other
are a
the
number
only
of
other
Go ahead,
avenue
Faisal.
the only other avenue that I could see is if you know, the United States, Germany, France, and England and Italy, if they somehow see the light, wake up someday and realize, you know, that what's going on, and then they decide to try to create a real peace there and force the Israelis to come to grips with what was going on and what they were doing, and maybe get everybody
I
to
don't
agree
know.
on
We
a
cannot
way
decide
forward.
about it now, but we can decide. I think this is the honest decision that we people can make. We people who are impotent, completely impotent. We people who vote every 4 years for people who destroy our lives. Maybe we should rethink democracy and rethink our ways and rethink the way we solve problems. But it should be a long thinking, not like that in a minute. You know, I don't know. I didn't
Well,
see anyone
there are
trying to
certainly
stop it. I
many-
only saw people that profit from war, people who profit from the occupation. All the countries in Europe and the United States, that's what they do. Okay, so we, you know, the poor, the victims, we have to live our lives in some alternative universe. I don't know, small as it is and short as it is.
Yeah, I think with this note, we will be winding up the discussion here. We've taken an hour and a half of your time almost.
Okay.
And we've had 250 people listen to your presentation, and right now we still have 218 of those engaged with us in the discussion, which is quite good.
I saw one question I want to really address. Somebody asked me about an organization called Impact that is very influential in UNESCO, in the American Congress, in the European Parliament, and so on. It's a very right-wing organization, pretends to be an academic organization, which is not. They only rented a room in the university. They make so-called research into Palestinian education and media, and they come out with the most terrible conclusions, but they're not serious. I don't know why they're so influential. I don't know why they're having such a success and they have so much money and influence. I do know that Palestinian Authority now, the Ministry of Education is going to answer them, and I'm helping them in that, you know, one by one. So that's what I know about Impact, except that the CEO of Impact, told me once that he dedicates his life to destroying me. So that's the level of, intellectual discussion. And that's it. Okay. Again, my colleague Samira Alayan knows much more about this, and she can enlighten you. I suggest you really invite her to hear about education in Palestine, because it's fascinating, and maybe these horrible conditions are the best educations you can give children. To give them blank pages and make them research what should have been there.
Yeah. Well, Nurit,
many of our viewers have talked about how your work has inspired them, and I think there's more education going on about this part of the world than ever before. There's more voices speaking out. So in spite of your pessimism, I'd like to end on a semi-positive note that it is hopeful that that people can pressure our governments, that perhaps the cost of waging war will be higher than the cost of waging peace in the future. And I think that's up to all of us to continue to put that pressure on our elected officials and ultimately on the state of Israel to transform into something where all people can live with dignity between the river and the sea. I know that it seems very far off, but
you should work towards peace. It's not a question of how much it costs. It's a question of, are you human or not? And maybe what we see in front of our eyes now is the human part of, this is humanity, and then it's even sadder.
Nurit, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and sharing with us your very valuable insight. A recording of this program will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow. You're welcome to view it and share it with your contacts. Next weekend, on the 14th, which is a Sunday, we are screening the film Israelism, which should be an interesting discussion afterwards also. We hope that the director of the film will join us also. On the 13th, we are not sure what we will be programming. There is a huge demonstration in Washington, D.C. that a lot of us are going to. And there are hundreds of buses that will be conversion on Washington, D.C. on Saturday morning next week. And I intend to be there, and hopefully I can report from there and send some videos and images and talk to some of the people there. So the program is currently for Saturdays is open. We have not figured out the best way to do that. One of the problems of doing live coverage is that once you enter into the center of the demonstration, the phone system breaks down and you cannot use any connectivity whatsoever until you get about 4 or 5 blocks away from the center of the demonstration, because the number of demonstrators outstrip the bandwidth and the capacity of the phone system to handle phone calls, and as a result, they shut it down for that zone, for the zone where the demonstration is. It's not done on purpose or to shut it up or anything. It's just a technical limitation of the phone systems from being able to handle that many phone lines at the same time. But thanks, thank you, Krista, for co-hosting with me, and thank you to the 250 people who joined us. I know there was another 100 or so who registered and did not attend, but hopefully they can watch the recording later on. And thanks, everyone. And Nurit, we hope to see you again in the future. Thank
you so much, Nurit, for your time and your expertise and knowledge and wisdom. Thank you so much.
Enjoy Greece.
Yes.
And as we say at the end, ma salama and goodbye.
Ma salama.
Bye-bye.
Ma salama. Bye.